What's going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Today, I'm going to talk about another free agent group. We talked about the wide receiver group just a few days ago. If you guys haven't seen that video, I encourage you to go check that out. Cody and I broke down a couple different free agents in that group that you could see the Colts potentially going for, whether you wouldn't see them going for them. That's up to you guys to decide, but I highly encourage you to check that out. We're going to try and break down a lot of these different positions that we think the Colts might dabble into a little bit. Okay, so pass rush. Anyone that's been watching the podcast over the last few weeks knows that my big thing has been pass rush, right? I've been talking about it a lot. I've talked about there are a couple of names in here that the Colts could make that would enhance their edge presence a lot. And, there's a couple of guys in here that are a little older than what you would want. They're not a long-term fix, but they are somebody who can drastically improve your defense if you were to grab a couple of these guys. We'll break down a couple of those here, and we'll see what you guys think. And again, this is what Robert Mathis has been saying all this time. You need the quarterback. You need the guys who can get to the quarterback, right? That's what it's all about. It's all about getting that edge rush. We've been seeing it over the last few years, and we've seen it in these playoffs specifically. The team that can get to the quarterback the most times is going to win the football game. And we saw that with the Rams this year. Rams, they're getting to the quarterback a lot. And, what happens when they got to the quarterback? They made a few plays happen. So that's exactly what you want to talk about. So first guy that we'll talk about here, and that is Vaughn Miller. Vaughn Miller, who is 32, is going to be 33 by the time the season starts. So yes, on the verge of being a lot older, okay? But again, what we saw from Vaughn Miller this year, we know Vaughn Miller still has some juice left in him. He still has something left in him. He's not quite the guy that you remember from 2016 or 2017, but he's still pretty dang good. He does have some moves on him. Average annual salary market value wise is around 11 million, 10.5, 11 million. So, a 1 or 2 year contract for a guy like Vaughn could be interesting. Again, didn't play in 2020. 2021, this last year, had 8.5 sacks. On playing 66% of the snaps, right? And, even you looking at a few years beforehand, he's just been a monster in the games that he has played. I think the lowest sacks he's ever had was 5, and that was back in 2013, right? You just look at what he did this year, 8.5 sacks, 49 tackles, and played in 15 games. Remember, he came in to the Rams also on a shorter stick, right? He didn't quite play all the games. But Vaughn Miller shows you he does have some juice left in him. And that's something that really could be helpful for a guy like Kwity Paye, somebody who is still learning. You can learn something from Vaughn Miller, right? You can make something work of that. And Vaughn, he wouldn't have to be a full-time starter for you. He wouldn't have to be. You feel confident in the defensive scheme that you're going to have. You feel confident if you get Kamoko Toure a few more snaps. You have Kwity Paye. You have Dio Dangbo that you can move around. You feel confident that you can give him some time, some free time to be able to rest, right? So Vaughn Miller's not going to be an every down guy. He's going to be more of your pass rush specialist. He'll play 60 to 70% of your snaps, but he'll come off for some of the earlier downs or things of that nature. And that's what you need from a guy like Vaughn Miller, somebody who brings that specialty to the pass rush department. Now, let's go into the next one here. And for me specifically, this is my favorite one. This is my favorite defensive end pass rush guy, and that is Chandler freaking Jones from the Arizona Cardinals, okay? Again, he's about to turn 32 years old. I know, again, he's not young. I get that. He would not be a long-term solution. But again, this guy has only had 3 seasons. He has been in the NFL for 10 years. Only 3 of those years did he not have double-digit sacks. Okay? And the last time he didn't have one was in 2020 because he got hurt in the 5th game. Okay? So he was out for the majority of that season, so didn't get there. But again, of his 10 seasons, 7 of those he has had double-digit sacks. Even this last year, where it was considered somewhat of a down year for him. Only played 76% of the snaps. He still had 10.5 sacks and 41 tackles and forced 7 fumbles. Forced 7 fumbles on 41 tackles. Guys, think about that. So this guy not only is able to get to the quarterback, is not only a smart guy that can make plays off the edge, guy that can beat any left tackle in the game almost. This guy also forces fumbles. He forces turnovers. And that's exactly what you need. And this defense specifically that prides itself on creating turnovers. Chandler Jones fits that mold. Again, Chandler Jones is going to be a little bit heavier of a price. Because you know the name. You know the name Chandler Jones. You think Chandler Jones, you think one of the best edge rushers in the game. And again, even with his age, it still doesn't bother me. I think you could get this guy for a 2-3 year contract, front load that contract, and then have an opt-out for after that 2nd year. I think Chandler Jones can really do something special with this team if he were on this team right now. I could only imagine a 2nd year Kwity Paye, DeForest Buckner, Dio Dangbo in the middle on a 3rd down, and Chandler Jones on the other side. I could only imagine what that defensive line could do. I mean, I'm really, really happy with that one. All right, another one that people talked about is Dante Fowler. 27 and a half years old, pretty good. Think you've seen more of his value later. You haven't seen much of it recently. I don't think he's worth asking the same price as Vaughn Miller. I know that he's younger than Vaughn Miller by quite a few years, but I just don't see the same upside to Dante Fowler Jr. as I do to some of these other guys. So that's why I would probably move on from that. And then I've seen some people talk about guys like Pierre, Paul, and Campbell. There's a bunch of older guys. I haven't really seen a lot of production out of them, so I just don't know if that is worth doing. I mean, you look at what the edge rush looks like for Buffalo. I mean, it's pretty interesting because, you know, they got Jerry Hughes and Madison that needs to be re-signed. You know, Jerry Hughes, I've seen people talk about it, but, you know, the sack numbers are just not there, and he's getting older. So, you know, I just don't see any point to making that argument, right? And same with Anthony Barr and some of these other guys. Another name, I brought this up from before. I brought this name up from before, and people kind of gave me flack for it. I'll just mention it just because I think it's worth mentioning. Don't think it'll happen, but we'll see what happens here. Jadeveon Clowney signed with Cleveland this last year and almost tied his NFL record for most sacks in a season. He had 9 this year for Cleveland. Now, granted, Jadeveon Clowney's also working alongside of a great edge rusher like Myles Garrett. So the attention is not completely focused on Jadeveon Clowney. He was getting a lot more of the one-on-one matchups. But Jadeveon Clowney, again, it all comes down to the price when it comes to Jadeveon Clowney, right? Market value for him, he should not be getting more than $10 million. I'm just saying. Should not be doing that, but, you know, he might do that because, you know, he had a good season with Cleveland this year. So we'll see what happens. But again, a guy that can play against the run is improving as a pass rusher and, you know, is still in the relative youth of his prime is not bad, in my opinion, when it comes to him. You got guys like Emmanuel Agba that also garner some attention. I'm not 100% certain on him, but there's one other name that I mentioned that I am very, very high on, and that is Hassan Reddick. Okay. Average annual salary for market value is around $15 million, which stinks for us because if you are the Colts, you should have tried to get this guy last year. Should have tried to get this guy last year because Carolina got him for $6 million, and in return, he gave them 11 sacks. So I'm just telling you guys, I think that Hassan Reddick is really starting to climb in what he is trying to become because 27 years old, probably be 28 right around season's time. His last year in Arizona in 2020 had 12 and a half sacks. Actually, I think led the team that year and forced 5 fumbles. So Hassan Reddick really rose to that more upper status in the free agent market when it came to the pass rushers. And just nobody really went and got him for a decent price, which is weird. I think a lot of people thought that it was an outlier year. I thought they were thinking it was more of an outlier. They didn't think he was going to get in that double-digit sack range again. Sure enough, he goes to Carolina and gets 11 sacks the next year following. So he followed up right with what he normally did. So, this is a guy that I think is at that level now where he's going to be one of the top edge rushers in free agent markets. And the only thing that sucks for the Colts is, man, I wish that we would have signed this guy last year because now you're going to have to pay double for Hassan Reddick. And that really stinks because Reddick really is a great player to me. And if there was one edge guy that I would want to grab, I think Reddick is one of my top 3 for sure. So Reddick is definitely a great one. And then you look at just a few other names. There's not a whole lot more after what we have already have on our market, right? Tyquan Lewis is going to be a free agent. Al-Qadim Muhammad's going to be a free agent. And some of these other guys, Isaac Rochelle is going to be, we're starting to get into that territory where, it just doesn't make sense to grab a couple of these guys. I've seen people talk about Derrick Barnett, former first-round pick. But again, he's never had a sack season of 7 or more sacks. I mean, there's no point in grabbing him when he doesn't produce numbers. We need a number. We don't need a quantity now. We need quality, and we need somebody who's going to step in and be that guy, right? Because if you were just going to get a Barnett or a Solomon Thomas or something, you would just go with Kwity Paye and Dio Adegbo. You wouldn't even attempt to spend $4 million trying to get one of those guys in here, right? So, I'm thinking in terms of, some of those top guys. Like I said, this is a position that I think the Colts really need to tap into this offseason. And like I said, guys, there's a few of them. And I really hope that the Colts try with some of these because there's only a few of them that really capture a significance factor when it comes to making big plays and making consistent pressure. Okay? We already have a bunch of young guys that we think if they're coached right, they can do better. Okay? But right now, we need better players. We need a guy. We need the guy, right? That can get pressure on the edge. Okay, we have DeForest Buckner, who is a top defensive tackle in this league, already garners a lot of attention. You garner somebody over there on that side that can go and get pressure off the edge. Watch this defense immediately get better. Watch it. Just watch it. And this is a position that we absolutely need in order to play in this cover 3 scheme that we're thinking of running this year. I think it's so pivotal. We saw it towards the end of the year. This defense late in games got burned because we weren't able to get pass rush. This is a time that the Colts do something to fix this pass rush by not addressing it in the draft, going for it in the market. That's going to do it for this one, guys. Let me know what you think in the comments about this position, what you think the Colts should do. Is there any names in here that you like that I mentioned? Is there any other names that I didn't mention that you think that we should try and attempt to get? But thank you guys again so much for the continued support. Greatly appreciated. And as always, go Colts.